Hi everyone, Michelle here from michellesmidheaven.com, and today I want to talk about planets that are in the heart of the sun. And most of you know this planetary condition probably by the name of CAZIMI, and I always receive a lot of questions about CAZIMI planets from students. Since the source texts don't really offer us that much information, I wanted to bring some definitions and interpretations to the table today and explore some chart examples. And hopefully this will inspire you as well to research natal charts with CAZIMI planets. Let's take a look. Okay, while we can be flexible about a lot of the rules and techniques in astrology, the one thing we need to be very precise about is the planetary condition of CAZIMI, because a planet is either CAZIMI or combust. It can be anywhere in between. So there's no blending. Unlike other patterns in the chart, we don't look at the dynamic of a planet becoming CAZIMI or just about to escape combustion. It's either CAZIMI or combust, and their interpretation should be different, so we really need to know. Unfortunately, you'll notice there's a variety of definitions out there. It appears that Hellenistic astrologers were satisfied using a 1 degree distance from the sun on either side. But when we get to medieval astrology, they took note of the actual size of the solar disk we see in the sky. The sun's disk spans an average width of 33 minutes longitude. So a planet in the heart of the sun needs to be within this range or within 16 minutes on either side of the solar center. I listed the options here. A planet at the heart of the sun is any planet within a 1 degree distance of the sun. So that's within 1 degree before or after the sun. The second definition is any planet within a 1 degree distance of the sun and at the same degree as the sun. This means that if the sun is at 25 degrees and 3 minutes of Libra, Mercury at 24 degrees and 58 minutes would not be CAZIMI. Each degree is made up of 60 minutes. So even though Mercury would only be at a 5-minute distance from the sun, strictly speaking, it's not CAZIMI according to this definition, because Mercury is at 24 degrees and it should have been located at 25 degrees because the sun is at 25 degrees. According to this definition, the degrees are seen as steps on a flight of stairs. So you're always stepping on one stair at a time, and a planet needs to be on the same stair as the sun, so to speak. I think that would be unlikely. But as I said, a little later in the tradition, the distance from the sun was limited to 16 minutes. And then again, we can make a similar case for those 16 minutes having to occupy the same degree as the sun. And then lastly, I added this other definition that says for a planet to be truly in the heart of the sun, it would have to be located directly in front or behind the sun. And this is something we cannot see directly in the horoscope wheel. Let's say if Jupiter and the sun are both located at the same degree in a sign, in other words, when the sun conjoins Jupiter, typically Jupiter will be above or below the sun. Planets are usually traveling just above or below the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is a path of the sun. Latitude is a planet's distance from the ecliptic. As you can see here, Jupiter is located below the sun. The sun is not passing right in front of Jupiter. So some astrologers would say that's not a real CAZIMI. They would check a planet's latitude to find out if it's really in the heart of the sun or not. Well, here's an example of a conjunction happening on the same longitude and latitude as the sun. Had to mark it here with a circle because you can't see it, but there's a little dot that represents Mercury passing through the heart of the sun. This is Mercury at the same longitude as the sun, 16 degrees of Taurus, and Mercury passes a little above the center here of the sun at 12 minutes latitude. This is still within the 16-minute boundary, so this falls within the solar disk, as you can see. Okay, now aside from the variety of definitions that's out there, there are probably other factors we need to take into account, other considerations that impact our interpretation. Ancient astrologers believed a planet to be greatly empowered when in the heart of the sun. It's this brief moment within a period of combustion when a planet takes on the potency of the sun. That implies that the sun's condition is also very important here. If the sun is located in his own domicile, Leo, it sounds plausible the sun would do better and have a more positive influence than if the sun were in Aquarius, for example, where the sun is said to be exiled or in detriment. And this may have an effect on the strength of the CAZIMI moments or on the interpretation, and whether it's a more positive or negative expression of the CAZIMI planet. And of course, it seems plausible to consider the essential dignity of the CAZIMI planet as well. Is a CAZIMI Venus in Scorpio still as sweet as a CAZIMI Venus in Taurus? How far does the protection of the sun reach, right? This is something we need to figure out. I don't have all the answers, to be honest, and all I can say is that similarly to other situations, the natural significations of the planets seem to trump everything else. Are all of the best, noblest Venusian significations of a CAZIMI Venus in Scorpio going to be completely protected by the sun? What about a CAZIMI Venus in Aries? Venus is also in detriment in Aries, but here the sun is exalted. How do we involve the ruler of Aries, Mars, etc.? So, what does it mean for the topics of the house and what kind of influence does the CAZIMI planet have on the houses it's ruling? What about the house the sun is ruling, and so forth? You see how fast it gets complicated? Now, usually in a chart reading, in a conversation with a client, it's much easier to find out what the client's specific CAZIMI is all about. But when it comes to making good predictions when looking at the transits in general, it would be nice to have a little more certainty around that. While I was looking for examples of CAZIMI planets, I noticed the charts that really stand out are the ones where the planet is within 16 minutes of the sun. And it doesn't seem to matter if the planet has the same latitude or not. So let's quickly go through some examples here. And just to keep it simple for now, I'm going to focus on Venus CAZIMI charts. This is Muji's chart, and even if we don't have his exact birth time, we know that Venus was CAZIMI all day on his birthday. So he's definitely born under this CAZIMI Venus placement in Aquarius. Venus is the goddess of desire, attraction, and magnetism. And Muji is, of course, a spiritual teacher who attracts many followers. We see the same attraction with Oprah Winfrey, who was born on the same day as Muji. She's, of course, incredibly successful, and she literally also talks a lot about the law of attraction. Then we have Teal Swan, who became a spiritual influencer through her videos on YouTube. She too has a lot of followers. Through their Venusian magnetism, Muji, Oprah, and Teal draw people together. People start following them. They all express enormous spiritual leadership, which is expressed by a Sun-Venus combination. I know we usually think of Jupiter as being associated with spirituality, but actually Venus is too. Venus was associated with priesthood. Venus's attraction and desire can be symbolically understood as a deep longing to become one again with the source. And in order to know the truth about something, in order to really know something, you need to become it. It's that attraction then that brings us to the object of our desire. Venus, traditionally keeping the temple of worship clean, also purifies the emotions. Venus is the goddess of the rites of purgation. Essentially, that's what these three people are trying to do in their work, in their service to others. They're trying to release and clear emotions and thought patterns that are stuck. You'll notice all three of them have Mercury in the same sign as the Sun and Venus. So what they do is they constantly communicate with others, right? Mercury offers them a great tool here. That's how they're trying to purify other people's emotions through talking with people. And another important Venusian signification they're all expressing is, of course, that they attract a lot of money. I always think it's important to take a deep dive into all of the natural significations of a planet when that planet has a special status like CAZIMI in the chart. Now, as you probably noticed, the Sun and Venus don't have any major dignity in these charts. The Sun and Venus at 9 degrees of Aquarius in Muji's and Oprah's charts are in the bounds and face of Venus, yes, but those are weaker types of dignities, right? And they're also in the domicile of a malefic planet, Saturn, and in the detriment of the Sun. As for Teal's chart, Venus is peregrine, so Venus doesn't enjoy any dignity at all, and the Sun is only in its own decan. Mercury is doing pretty well here, though, in its own sign, Gemini, and that has a positive effect on the other planets co-present in Gemini. Well, maybe because of the weaker dignities of these planets, we might see that as a sign of the fact that all three of them wrestle with a great deal of controversy, not to mention their love life. All three of them have experienced major setbacks and controversy over Venusian matters of love, sexuality, and relationships. Whether this is all true or not doesn't even matter. The charts just show that abuse or alleged abuse can be a major theme. Venus is also the natural significator of sisters. Muji's sister was in fact shot by the police and left paralyzed. The shooting instigated the 1985 riots in Brixton, and Muji then had to deal with the press, which made an abrupt end to his life as an artist. Art, that's another signification of Venus, right? Now, for Muji as well as for Oprah, we need to take into account the challenging superior square from both of the malefic planets, Mars and Saturn in Scorpio. They're both squaring the Venus CAZIMI from a dominant position, which is very harsh. Saturn in particular is even making a very tight degree-based square. So it's definitely clear we cannot attribute all of these setbacks to the Sun being exiled in Aquarius. The square from the malefics really stands out here. I looked up many other charts, of course, not all of them, but from what I've seen so far, the closer the planet to the Sun, the more intensified the role will be that the CAZIMI planet is playing in the native's life. Now, let's take a look at Jessica Lang's chart. In contrast to the other charts I just talked about, you'll notice Venus is farther away from the Sun. She's actually separating from the Sun. She's still within 1 degree of the Sun, so technically, if we follow the older Hellenistic definition, Venus is in the heart of the Sun. And this is the time on her birth certificate, but I double checked, and Venus maintains this particular distance from the Sun for quite a while, so we can be sure she's born with Venus just within a 1 degree distance from the Sun. What struck me here is that despite Venus residing in her own domicile, Taurus, in a very strong, angular position, Jessica has suffered from bouts of depression her whole life, and she often experiences an overwhelming sense of loneliness. This is not something we'd expect from a well-dignified, benefic Venus, goddess of pleasure in the heart of the Sun, who is the helm ruler here. As for her emotional well-being, we can, of course, also look at the moon. Although Peregrine here, she's co-present with the beneficent sect Jupiter, also in a good house. So that's pretty nice too. So why would Jessica Lange struggle with depression? Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, it could indicate that Venus needs to be considered combust here, and that a CAZIMI planet needs to be within 16 minutes of the sun. But Venus is in her own sign Taurus, and that puts Venus in her chariot, which is said to protect a planet from the beams of the sun. Now, there are other clues in the chart, though. The moon and Jupiter are ruled and opposed by an exiled Saturn in the first house. And more importantly, Saturn is actually forming an antitia with the sun, the first house ruler. I think the antitia between Saturn and the sun is a very strong indication of the potential for depression. Again, you can see how important the context is of the rest of the chart. In Jessica Lange's case, you could think this CAZIMI Venus, if it's a real CAZIMI, here in her own sign Taurus, overcoming Saturn through a superior square, you'd think Venus would trump Saturn if she was in this special CAZIMI position, and yet she doesn't. So it looks like other considerations are more important. You know, I would definitely have made a video on this topic a long time ago if it was super clear to me, but it just isn't, at least not to me. Sometimes it feels like the condition of CAZIMI might be a little overrated. I'm not sure. I mean, yes, I noticed that the natural significations of the CAZIMI planet are going to be very important in a person's life. But then any planet close to the sun is going to play a very important role in the person's general storyline. I do think that there's an intensification of the planet's natural significations, especially when a planet is very close to the sun. And in that sense, yes, a CAZIMI planet is empowered, but a CAZIMI planet seems to be empowered in all its facets. It's almost like an exaggeration of planetary meaning, expressing the best as well as the worst of all its significations. So empowerment doesn't necessarily mean that it's all positive. I always keep coming back to the importance of the context of the chart. A CAZIMI planet doesn't stand on its own. It's got to be part of a larger pattern we can detect in the chart, of the bigger story in the chart. Every chart is unique, and we really can't generalize the meaning of any placements or planetary conditions. We just can't. Despite of that, I'm certainly not done exploring this topic, and I'd love to hear about your findings. Let me know if you enjoyed this video by giving it a thumbs up, and please subscribe if you haven't already. And I'd love to respond to your questions and comments. So thank you so much for watching. Until next time.